Hello, my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my Pride Month reading wrap-up, otherwise known as my June 2022 reading wrap-up. I did set a pretty ambitious TBR at the beginning of the month, and I read half of it, plus one extra, which makes a total of 6 books that we are going to be talking about today, and the rest of them are going to be moving right into my also kind of ambitious summer TBR. So with that, content warnings will be linked down in the description below if you want to check those out, along with some links to my journal with me's that I did for a lot of the books in this video. So let's go ahead and get into the wrap-up. Okay, so we are just going to be going in the order that I finished these in, which means the first up is the Shadow of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee, which is the sequel to the Rise of Kyoshi. So this duology takes place in the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe and follows the story of Avatar Kyoshi and her journey of how she became the person that she is known as throughout the series. So when it comes to book 1, I have like this complicated past with it because I liked it, but I do have this really bad memory around it because I was in one of the worst reading slumps that I have ever had during the time that I was reading it. And unfortunately that did affect my experience with it greatly, and those feelings did make a small return in this book. But overall, I did finally have the experience that I wish that I had with book 1, and I finally had it with this one. And it was such a good experience that it makes me kind of want to go reread that one and try to see if I can have that experience that I know that I should have had. I loved how much of the world and the politics we got to explore, and this was something that I got really invested in because I always just want to be in this world and like know everything about it. And on that note, I do think this duology and this book in particular do really feel like a book version of the shows, and it just feels like it fits right in. I also really love the characters. They had these fun personalities and they played off of each other in really fun ways. Something else that really stood out to me were like the villains, antagonist characters. There's a character in here that I was just super fascinated by, and I thought that this character's arc was done so well. Like, this is one of my favorite antagonists that I've read in a while. I also enjoyed Kyoshi's character arc in this book, and kind of like with book 1, I like that we just got to know her more throughout this duology. As for the romance, it was cute and sapphic. They have some really fun moments and I like them together, even though I wouldn't say I have strong feelings. But there were a couple of moments where they did get the strong feelings, even if I did mostly stay in a positive neutral territory with them. The story itself was interesting, but like I mentioned earlier, some of those old reading slump feelings did seep its way in, which was not fun, and I found those parts difficult to pay attention to, even though I did really want to pay attention to those parts. So I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was fun, and it both satisfied my wish to be in this universe and also made me crave more. So next up is Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron. So this story takes place 200 years after Cinderella found her prince, and teen girls are being required to attend an annual ball where they can be selected as wives. Those who are not chosen are never heard from again. Our main character decides to flee from this ball, and while she is hiding in Cinderella's mausoleum, she ends up meeting Cinderella's last known descendant, and together they vow to take down the king once and for all. So I was very fortunate to have read quite a few books this month with strong feminist themes, which will come into play more later on in this video, but I did really enjoy that aspect of the story. I thought that the author did some really cool things with fairy tale. It was dark and twisty and like everything that I wanted and more, and I just found it to be so interesting and engaging, which only makes me want to read This Poison Heart by this author even more than I already did, so be prepared to see that in a TBR very soon. It was already in one, but it's going to be in another one. But I told myself that I was going to read this one first because I've owned it for longer, and I am really glad that I read this. I really enjoyed our main character, as she was definitely another highlight of this book for me. The romance was once again cute and sapphic. They did feel a little bit insta-lovey to me, and I would have liked to see more development, but they do have some fun banter. So it's like I'm mad, but I'm not at the same time. The ending portion of this book is unfortunately where I really started to struggle with it. Not that it was like hard to physically read or anything, because that was never an issue, and I really look forward to picking up this book every time that I went to go pick it up. But the way the story was structured and the way things went down, I just did not love it, and I thought that it felt really rushed, and it felt like some things were happening that didn't make sense, but were happening anyway because the story needed to end. So I definitely do think this book could have been a little bit longer, especially since I was enjoying everything up to that point. So I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars, but this will definitely not be my last book by this author, because I feel like this author has a lot to offer and a lot of really cool and interesting concepts. So next up, I have Volume 1 of Bloom Into You by Nakatani Nio. This follows our main character, who is a big fan of shoujo manga and has always dreamed of a day when she would receive a confession of her own. However, when that day comes from one of her male classmates, she ends up feeling nothing. She enters high school still unsure of how to respond, but gets inspired when she sees a student council member turn down her own suitor, so she goes to ask her for advice. Our main character's romance may have finally begun, however, when the next confession that she receives comes from that student council member herself. So I read this volume a little bit unplanned because I wanted to include this series in my Pride Month book recommendations video, and I'm just really glad that I have finally started it. I had read novel 1 of the light novel first, so it's interesting to be in the main series feeling like I know more about like a main side character than the main characters. They have this comedy style that I always do typically really love, and I definitely felt that in here once again. It's only volume 1, but I do really feel like I need to see more development in the romance area before I form any type of opinion on it. But I'm sure that is 100% coming because, like I said, it's only volume 1. And I just cannot wait to read more of both the manga and the light novel series. I just have to get my hands on the rest of the volumes first. Or at least like the second volumes, because I only have volume 1 of both of them. I also do really want to watch the anime, and I'm so torn because I do want to read the manga first. I also watched the Kase-san and the Morning Glories OVA and the anime adaptation of Adachi and Shimamura this month, which I do feel like helped fill the hole that Bloom Into You left after I finished this volume, but not completely because now I just want more. This volume was like a 3.5 for me, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, but I am so sure that this series has plenty of 5 stars coming in the future. Next up is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Sáenz, which is the sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. Aristotle and Dante follows 2 boys who are really opposite of one another, however they develop a special bond once they meet, and this bond ends up helping them grow into who they want to be as individuals and also helps them learn the most important truths of their lives. I really should have reread book 1 before reading this, which is a thought that I've had at multiple points to various extents throughout this month, so that's a thing. I will say this was the strongest variation of that thought for sure, but I did get past it at a certain point, which is good. I feel like I don't really know how to talk about this book because I just don't know if I can sort through my thoughts in a way that I need to in order to talk about this book. But I am going to try. This book just carved out a section of these characters' lives, and I thought it was really beautiful, even though it was hard at times because there are a lot of sad and difficult subject matters. This book was actually my answer for the book that made you cry prompt in the mid-year book freakout tag, because that was also something that this book did to me. The lovely atmosphere that I loved about book 1 definitely made a couple of returns in here, and that is probably more important to me than it should have been, but still it was. The character growth for Aristotle in this book may be some of the best that I have ever read, and I was just so impressed with it. That being said, I didn't always love like the dialogue. It felt kind of too unrealistic at points, and just like I didn't love some of the way some of the story was structured. There's also a certain character that I would have liked to see more of. This character just kind of felt missing despite not being missing in the story, and I would have liked to know more. The romance also has some really beautiful moments, and the same thing goes for like this book as a whole. And I gave this book a 4.25 out of 5 stars, and I am just really grateful for the time that I got to spend with these characters. So after reading Aristotle and Dante, I was craving something that would be more lighthearted and fun, so my next book is The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzi, which is the sequel to Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. So this follows our main character where his grand tour of Europe and also his quest for pleasure and vice is in danger. After this tour is over, he will be forced into taking over his family's estate and following all of the responsibilities that come with that. Therefore, he is determined to make the most out of his year-long tour with a sister and childhood friend slash crush, but his recklessness ends up turning the trip into a manhunt across Europe. Okay, so once again, I kind of wish I reread book 1. Not because that I think that I needed it, because honestly I don't think you need that many of the details for book 1 for this one, but I want to reread it anyway because I found myself both insanely happy to be back into this universe and also really missing the characters. So it wouldn't have been a reread for necessity, but it would have been more of a reread for my own personal happiness. The story does follow Felicity, who is in book 1. There is a sexual representation, which was so lovely to see. And then there's also a lot of discussion around feminism, which, like with Cinderella is Dead, I really enjoyed reading. But for this book in particular, I happened to be coincidentally reading it during a devastating and infuriating current event. The feelings were heightened, and it was nice to be reading a book at this time that kind of matched at least some of my energy. I also liked how they used these discussions to further some much needed character growth on Felicity's part, because you get these like different perspectives and it was interesting. And there were also just some really great women in this story, and the author's note in the back talks about the real life women that they are based off of, which I thought was really cool. I also enjoyed getting to know Felicity as a character. She's definitely a flawed character, and the story really focuses in on that. And I thought that she had an interesting journey. I didn't love every turn that this book took, and some of it, especially like some of the more comedic moments, felt a little too cheesy for me. But I did really end up liking this overall. Not only do I want to do rereads, but I definitely want to read the rest of the series soon. I do have this one right here. This is the novella. I think I was actually supposed to read it in between these two, but that did not happen. But it will probably happen very soon anyway, just out of order. It's been a couple of years since I've read book 1, and it's like I forgot how much I loved it. And I definitely really enjoyed this one as well, and I gave it 4 stars. And the final book that I finished in the month of June is Sovereign by April Daniels, which is the sequel to Dreadnought. So Dreadnought follows our main character Danny, who is trying to keep everyone from finding out that she is transgender. But that all changes when the superhero Dreadnought is murdered right in front of her eyes, and when he transfers his powers to her, Danny suddenly finds herself in the body that she's always thought that she should have had. However, alongside the confusions of coming out, Dreadnought's murderer Utopia is still on the loose, and it's up to Danny to stop her. So after finishing The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, the month was almost over. And I wanted to read like one more thing before that happened, so I went with one of my shorter books that I had left on my TBR to see if I could squeeze it in before the month ends, and I did. I also apparently read a lot of sequels in June, which is very much needed because I am incredibly behind on a ton of series. I thought this book did a really good job in encapsulating what I want from a superhero book, for the most part at least. There were some things that I thought could have been built upon a little bit more, maybe just like a little more development in certain cases. There were also a lot of fight scenes, which they did their best to keep my attention during. I do think Dreadnought fared a little bit better with the fight scenes, but Sovereign kept my attention more than most books with fight scenes. And I do think that they were written really well, and I really wish that I ended up liking them more because of that. And there were times where I did feel that love, so it's kind of complicated. Like with Dreadnought, Danny has such a fun personality, and I just really like her. And she contributed to a lot of the fun moments in this book, and then there were also some pretty great side characters who also contributed to that. We also got to learn more about the world, which made me so happy. I still want more, and I think there could have been more explained, but I am happy with what we got because I'll take anything that this world wants to show me. This story also has some really interesting commentary surrounding power and superheroes and villains and the Grey Capes, and basically living that lifestyle as a career with that kind of power. And this does also really dive into Danny's character and how all the transphobia and other terrible things and people have affected her, which once again, content warnings down in the description below. As for how this book works as a sequel, I think it's a really good one, and I think it sets up for book 3 well without falling into middle book syndrome. The story also really does read like the novel version of a comic book, and I really enjoy that about this series. The romance was also pretty fun in this one. I like these two, and once again, like a lot of the other books in this video, it was cute and sapphic. I do think that I am going to go with the same rating here that I ended up giving Dreadnought, and go with a 4-star here as well. Okay, so that is all I have for today's video. My July TBR should be up next. And thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that. And hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye.